pushed back farther and farther and farther. It's probably not 10, 12,000 years. I used to tell my students 30, 40 years ago, it's probably 25, maybe 30,000, maybe even more than that. There were probably millions of people living here when the Europeans came. Okay? And that's not just true in what's now the United States. It was true in Mexico, true down in Central America, in South America. This was a very populated area. Now, Europeans come to this environment. Now, if you're familiar with those people who came to Jamestown, they came as employees of a company back in London. So the impetus for settling a lot of America is capitalism. Okay? You know what a capitalist is. A capitalist is a farmer that has 2 cows. And he sells 1 cow and he buys a bull. So you get that. My students, I explained to them, I said, cows are girls, bulls are boys. Oh, yeah, that's capitalism. Okay? So the Europeans come, they're capitalists. They're, by race, Caucasian. They're white, like my entire audience. Okay? We're all Caucasians. West Virginia is one of the least ethnically diverse states in the Union. Okay? So we're capitalist, we're Caucasian, and we're Christian. Okay, remember all those folks that come over here? They're Puritans, and they're Pilgrims, and they're Catholics, and they're a whole bunch of folks. And who do they encounter? They encounter a group of folks who are, let's see, non-capitalists. Non-Christians. And non-whites. Okay? Remember those 2 storm systems? The more unlike the weather, the more severe the problems. Now, if you had 43 years ago this fall, I was sitting at the library at the University of Hawaii reading a book called The Indian and the Idea of American Civilization. And the guy's name was Roy Pierce. I don't know why I remember that after all these years. But his thesis was that when Europeans come over and they looked at a forest, I'm dumbing it down a little bit. When they look at a forest, they don't see trees, they see lumber. Okay? And when they look at a field, they see pastures. They see barns. And in effect, if you're standing in the way of progress, we're going to push you out of the way. Now, you remember we have what's called the right of eminent domain. We can still do that. I used to tell this story back to some years ago. If you remember Sheriff Kathy Crumbly over in Belmont, and one of her famous things was she had to remove a guy by the name of Mr. Gilley, who was standing in the way of I-470. And he said, I don't want to sell my property. And they said, you don't have any choice. And to get him out, she had to pull her gun on him to get him out of there. Okay? We often say, well, you know, General Electric used to say what? Progress is our most important product. If you're not using it, then we can take it. I often tell the story, I have an older brother. And for the most part, he's been well, no, he wasn't that nice as a brother. Did you ever have did anybody have a real nice brother? See, I went to Hawaii. And when we were getting ready to go to Hawaii, my wife and I, we decided to take everything we needed. And I had this beautiful suit. It was a gorgeous suit. It was, I bought it at Crohn's. Remember when there was a Crohn's? You guys get that? I see my mother worked for Stone Top. And got this suit, had a vest, reverse wall, it was gorgeous. But it was made out of wool. You ever been to Hawaii? You don't need a wool suit. You don't need a wool suit. So we left in August, and we came back in November. And we got back in, and a couple days after we got back in, my mother said, "Oh, you're going to go to church?" And my mother, who was the church lady, I said, "Sure, I'll go to church." Hadn't been to church in Hawaii, but 15 months, but I'm going to go to church tomorrow. And it was November, so it was cold. So I go upstairs and I look for my suit. And I couldn't find it. I looked high, I looked low. So I went down and I said, "Mom, I can't find my suit." She said, "Yeah, I know." You know how moms are? Yeah. She don't want to tell you the real thing. And I said, "Where's my suit?" She said, "Your brother took it." I said, "My brother took the suit." Now you have to understand, my brother's 3 inches taller than I am. And I've always weighed more than him. And I said, "Mom, you let him take my suit?" She said, "Well, what could I do?" I said, so I called him. He was living up in Kendall, Ohio. I said, "Hey, Matthew." "Yeah, you took my suit." He said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Why'd you take my suit?" He said, "You weren't using it." I said, "But it wasn't your suit." He said, "I know, but you weren't using it." And I said, you justify taking my suit because I wasn't using it. You weren't using the suit." I said, "By the way, I can't find my golf clubs." And you know what he told me? "You weren't using it." Now, he was home this past summer. He lives in North Carolina. I said, "Do you know you've never repaid me for the suit or the golf clubs?" And you know what he said? "You weren't using it." Now, as silly as that sounds, that's kind of the argument that we're going to use with the Indian. "You're not using it." "Well, no, we're planting things here." "Well, where are your pastures? Where are your permanent villages?" "No, we don't do that." Okay? And if you've ever read anything about Indian-European relationships, starting with the Puritans and the Virginians, starts out pretty nice, and then it doesn't take very long before things get worse, and they get bad. It doesn't make any difference if you're a good Christian. If you want to see what the Puritans did to the Indians, holy moly. Start villages on fire, and then as they come running out, you shoot them. Cut off the heads of their leaders and post them on stakes. See, that's the other thing that I didn't tell you about these two groups that are so different. They both use violence to accomplish their objectives. Okay? And we use violence in some very good purposes. "Well, we've got to kill you because you're not a Christian." Well, that's not a very good Christian thing. "Well, I know, but..." beware, somebody said, beware what is done in the name of good. Okay. So what you're going to find in this area from about the 1770s until the middle of the 1790s is what is called border warfare. What's the border? The border is between European civilization and Indian civilization. And it is horrific. It is involved with some massacres, both of Europeans and Indians. It involves torture. It involves just a couple things that come to my attention. Because I thought, it's amazing what people can come up with. Settlers, I think it was up in Wellsburg, some woman was kidnapped and they were chasing after the Indians to get her back, and they found her. She was dead. They had taken a small sapling and taken that sapling and make a big nail out of it and impaled it right through her stomach. Okay? My favorite